Good morning, everyone. I'm Fiona Young and I'm the Democratic Services Officer for this meeting. I've been asked to deal with agenda item 2 first, which is the appointment of the chair. And I understand that members would like Councillor Douglas to chair this meeting. Is that agreed? Thank you, members.
Welcome everybody, that's members, officers and those watching the webcast at home. Before we start, I will deal with introductions. I'm Councillor Douglas and I'm chairing today's hearing panel, and Councillor Fisher and Councillor Chambers are also sitting on this subcommittee with me today. There is also a Democratic Services Officer, the Monitoring Officer and Deputy Monitoring Officer in attendance during this meeting. The independent person, Angharad Davis, unfortunately isn't with us today, but we can proceed as planned without her. Looking to the agenda, we will go to agenda item 1 first, which is declarations of interest. Is there anybody that feels that they need to declare anything to do with the agenda items today? No, I'm seeing no indications there, no declarations of interest. Item 3 is going to be the urgent business. We're moving that up from agenda item 5 so that we can have the public participation speakers. So if Gwen, would you like to step forward and speak? You have 3 minutes. Thank you. Sorry, excuse me.
I've got no paperwork at all. I got an email. Are you Jenny Berry? Which office? I got an email from Jenny Berry a few days before the 3rd of August saying I will receive an email. And I've received nothing.
Okay. Yes, please. So if we can just hold down for while the agenda and paperwork is provided to you. Thank you. Right, everybody, I think we can continue with the meeting now. And just before we start making any representations, if you wouldn't mind for a moment, thank you. It would be helpful for everybody if the participants in the meeting today could identify themselves, given that we don't have any name labels in front of us, so that participants here and also the public know who is who. And then we will consider the item that has just been raised. So for a start, this is our monitoring officer, Jamie Berry. Over here, if you could go around the table from that point, please, and introduce yourself, that would be really
Good morning,
helpful.
I'm Jamie Berry. I'm the Director of Governance and Monitoring Officer for City of York Council.
Rachel Antonelli, Senior Solicitor and Interim Deputy Monitoring Officer.
Councillor Stephen Hardcastle.
Councillor Chris Brack, representing Stephen Hardcastle.
Sorry, just to make you aware, we can only have 3 microphones on at a time. So if you speak, then you need to turn it off immediately, otherwise people can't hear you. So apologies for that.
Eve Hale.
Yeah, Walter Burns, the investigating officer, senior solicitor at the council in the commercial department of the legal team.
Fiona Young, Democratic Services Officer.
Councillor Tony Fisher, City of York Council, Strensall Ward and Chair of Strensall with Turthorpe Parish Council.
And as I mentioned earlier, I'm Councillor Claire Douglas. I'm a City Councillor in the ward of Heworth.
Councillor Chris Chambers, Strensall Parish Council, on the subcommittee.
Thank you, everybody. I would just like to ask a couple of questions of participants and also of the monitoring officer and deputy monitoring officer around procedure and agenda, so that the panel can be clear as to what happened before we arrived in the room today. So can I ask in turn either Councillor Hardcastle or Mr. Brack, as Councillor Hardcastle's representative, to tell me if you were informed previous to this meeting of the procedure that would happen today and given an agenda for today. And just one of you to speak, please.
I've received no information whatsoever apart from the date of the meeting. I haven't received anything on what I'm doing here, what's the process. All I know, there was a complaint against me, there was an investigation to be held. I've never been told about the investigation, didn't even know it was a hearing panel to go to until the investigation was complete. Then it was a hearing panel. I've had no other written documentation to do with the actual process. I don't know what the process is. I also asked by email.
Excuse me, Councillor Hardcastle, I just asked you for the first, to answer my question for a start, and we will go from there as deemed appropriate. So thank you for that. Mrs. Hale?
Yes, I did receive all the paperwork, but I didn't bring it with the whole thing with me. That's why I asked for a copy.
Okay, so you've been informed of procedure, what to expect of today, and you received the agenda.
Yes.
And was that a hard copy? Did it come through the post to you? How was it communicated?
Sorry, it came through email.
Okay, thank you. Right, question to monitoring officer or deputy monitoring officer. Do we have any evidence that Councillor Hardcastle was sent the procedure and the agenda for today, given that Mrs. Hale obviously has received all the information that she needed to participate?
Usually when all of the correspondence comes through the monitoring officer inbox, so that complainants and subject members know who it's coming from and what it relates to. it would have been sent out at the same time because we have both email addresses. I don't know why it's not been received, but if Mrs. Hales received it by email, then it would have been sent out at the same time, same day.
Just add in there, Mrs. Hale did tell us that she received it by post. Email. Okay. Right, okay. So can I ask how we proceed with this then, please?
Chair, Councillor Hardcastle and his representative are entitled to seek an adjournment to give them time to consider the papers, or given they're present, it is their gift to advise you as to whether they wish to proceed this morning or not, or whether they feel in a position to proceed this morning or not.
Thank you. So Councillor Hardcastle and Mr. Brack, the options that we have here are that you could ask for an adjournment to consider the papers, or as the monitoring officer has just advised us, if you feel that you're unable to proceed, you need to tell us that as well, and then we can delay for another date.
Could we just have 2 minutes on our own, please? Yeah.
Do you consider that is reasonable amount of time? We think that 15 minutes might be fair for you to consider how you move forward.
We only want 5 minutes. We don't need 15
Okay,
minutes.
well, don't feel as though you have to rush to that, please. Please take the time that you feel is necessary.
Can I before I go and talk to Chris, can I just say that me personally, it's been going on for months and months and months, this. However, I've now got to look through this.
Yeah, Councillor Hardcastle, I do understand, and that's why we've given you the option to tell us if you feel you're unable to proceed.
Okay.
And that is within your right to tell us that. So I think you should consider your options.
Okay.
Can I ask if there's a space that Councillor Hardcastle and Mr. Brack can use? Thank you. Please, can you show them, and we will adjourn the meeting until Councillor Hardcastle and Mr. Brack return in approximately 15 minutes. Right, can I just have everybody's attention for a moment, please? The Democracy Officer is printing Councillor Hardcastle another set of papers. In the meantime, the Deputy Monitoring Officer and the panel will leave the room for a few minutes we need to be updated on some further information, but you are all welcome to stay here, and please, we will be back. Thank you, everybody. Given that Councillor Hardcastle and Mr Brack have returned from deliberations, I'd just like to ask firstly you for your thoughts at this point, but then I'll also ask Mrs Hale for her thoughts on the situation that we find ourselves in at this point. So please, can you tell us how you would like to proceed, Councillor Hardcastle?
Looking through the paperwork, most of it I've seen anyway. It's been going on for months and months and months. This has been going on for. So I would like to possibly go ahead. However, I don't know what happens here. I don't know what the procedure is. So if I start making mistakes, it's not because I'm being awkward, it's because I don't know the procedure, you know.
Thank you, Councillor Hardcastle, and yes, we understand that, and that will be taken into consideration. Mrs Hale?
Yes, I would like to get this resolved. As Councillor Castle said, this has been going on for months and months and months. And I think it needs to be sorted today, if possible.
Okay, thank you, Mrs Hale. Thank you both for your comments. And the panel would just like to have a further deliberation about the comments that you've just made there, so that we can decide a route forward. And apologies to everybody else for the delay in the proceedings due to this. Sorry, Mrs Hale.
I'd just like to say that I have no idea what's going on either. So if I make mistakes by the same token, because I've...
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. We totally appreciate that, thank you. So we will leave the room again now for a few minutes and we'll come back to tell you how we've decided that we will move ahead, okay? Thank you, everybody, and we're reconvening to discuss the information that we've heard so far, and thank you for your patience up to this point. The panel have considered the situation that we find ourselves in and are concerned that it's not in the best interest of either parties to continue if at least one feels that they haven't really had the appropriate papers to review and understand in good time. In fact, we understand that there wasn't a link sent to you, Councillor Hardcastle, to the agenda.
Sorry, I couldn't hear. There wasn't.
No, there wasn't. Yeah, there wasn't a link sent to you with the agenda, which is the link that Mrs. Hale received. And we don't feel that this would be a fair procedure if you haven't had the chance to really study that and understand what will happen today. I will draw your attention to both of you that agenda pack that you now have includes the procedure and what you can expect of today. All of the information that you need is within that pack. So please do take the time to thoroughly read, consider and understand that, because we have to be confident that our deliberations are full and fair and that we come to the correct decision at the end of the day based on your ability to participate. So we have decided that in order to be fair to everybody and come to an appropriate decision, that we will be adjourning for another date, I am afraid. But I thank you for your cooperation in that. Excuse me, Councillor Hardcastle, you need to speak when I ask you to rather than when you choose to. So if you would like to say something briefly to what I have just said, then please indicate and I will ask you to speak. Mrs. Hale?
First of all, can you give me some indication how much longer this is going to drag out before the next meeting? Obviously, people have made arrangements twice now, holiday season, commitments, how much notice are we going to have? And also, can I raise the issue of the public participation? In view of the fact that it's on the agenda, is that an item of the agenda that will be discussed before the meeting actually takes place, so that we can make agreement or disagreement as to whether the public should be allowed to speak?
Yeah, the public participation section of the meeting is at the panel's discretion, and so we will consider that and let you know.
Well, I would like therefore to know if I can bring some other representation, because at the moment I'm on my own and Councillor Hardcastle has
Public participation is exactly as it says. It is quite the right of any member of the public to speak. We allow 30 minutes for that section, so if there's more than 10 people, then people will not be allowed to register beyond that. But within that, anybody can put themselves forward. Rachel?
I would just like to point out, Mrs. Hill, that there are only 2 people registered to speak today. The other members of the public are just members of the public. They're not public participants.
2 or 3, because I got the email saying to you there would be Mr. Burns, Mr. Hardcastle and myself.
But that's not witnesses. There are 2 different things at play here. They're not witnesses. It's public participants.
And they've got permission to speak.
So the council hosts a public participation scheme, which means that any resident of York is entitled to come to a meeting convened by the council and speak for up to 3 minutes on an issue that is either within the remit of the committee or an item that is on the agenda. For today's hearing, 2 members of the public have attended today, and they have registered to speak as part of the public participation, either on an item which is in the remit of this committee or an item that's related to the agenda. So there's the first 30 minutes is allocated to members of the public, i.e. residents of York, who wish to come and express a view. And there are 2 registered here today, and you're correct, those are the ones that sat nearest to yourselves. Mr. Burns is not classed as a member of the public because he is the investigating officer. So in terms of the running of the meeting, there is yourself and Councillor Hardcastle. He's brought a representative with him as well, and Mr. Burns. So are the 3 people other than myself, Democratic Services staff and members of the panel who are participants in this meeting going forward. I think my colleague was trying to explain that the other members of the public who are sat at the back of the room are here as literally just members of the public. They do not have a right to speak at this meeting. I'm not aware that they've registered in accordance with the council's protocols on registration, which are 2 members of the public have registered to do so. And so therefore they're here to observe only and do not play any part in the meeting going forward at all.
Right, thank you.
Because this is a public meeting, members of the public are entitled to attend a meeting such as this, sit in the room and observe, but they play no formal part at all.
Right. As regards Councillor Hardcastle and Councillor Brack, who speaks? Because obviously if they're both going to have the opportunity to speak.
So going forward, that is, if the meeting was to continue, that is an issue which will be clarified. If Councillor Hardcastle has brought a representative and indicates that he wants his representative to act on his behalf, then it would be Councillor Brack who would effectively do the talking in plain English on behalf of Councillor Hardcastle. But that is an issue that would be clarified. I'd just like to point out that you were also entitled to bring a representative with you. So,
well, I did ask, and the panel said no.
Right, you can ask.
For the previous meeting, I did send an email requesting,
Right.
having read the paperwork and realising that Councillor Hardcastle was bringing a representative, I did ask if I could bring
Right.
a representative, and the panel said no. For the previous meeting, it was
I don't think that's
cancelled.
correct. I think it was not in terms of a representative. The panel doesn't have a right to reject to bring in a representative. I think the conversations that have occurred previously was around availability, etc. But you are entitled to bring a representative if you so wish. But we can leave that with you because I don't think that that is an issue for this morning, to be honest, and we can pick that up with you outside of this meeting.
So if I was to email you and ask prior to the next meeting if I could bring a representative as opposed to a witness?
Yes, there's a difference between a witness and a representative. So a witness is someone that the investigating officer feels can add information to the case, or feels, or myself as a monitoring officer feel that the panel need to hear evidence from. A representative is here to support you and act as your advocate if you so wish, but also to be a companion or confidant for you, so that should you wish to share an idea or share a thought, you have got a companion with you who you can ask that person that advice with. So it's your own counsel in effect.
Right, well, that wasn't made clear on the declaration, you know, that I'm just having to see what it
On the
says.
checklist.
Yes, on the checklist, that isn't made clear whether it's what representation as opposed to witness means.
Okay.
It's not terribly clear that. Had I realised that, I would have actually asked for a representative.
Right. Okay, so I can pick that up without outside of this meeting, because the panel have made their view known that the meeting won't be going ahead today. Yeah. So in terms of procedure, I'm very happy to pick that up with you outside of this meeting. And if we need to clarify what the pre-hearing checklist actually means, quite happy to go through that with you outside of this meeting.
Just rather than just a blank form, I think
yes.
it could do with some further.
Yes, I just want to clarify in front of everybody, I'm not in a position to discuss the evidence with you, but I can answer procedural questions for you outside of this meeting. Yeah. So it's without detailing the investigation or any of the evidence.
Never been involved in anything like this before in my life.
That's
so,
fine.
you know, I'm working blind.
Yep.
So some clarification.
The
on
same offer goes to
procedure.
councillor Hale, to councillor Hardcastle as well. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, everybody. And I would just like to reiterate to participants about the agenda package and the information that is within there, that it really is the first port of call for all of the detail around these, the differences between witnesses and representation, etc., etc. Councillor Hardcastle, you would like to say something? Thank you.
Thank you. I have to say I'm extremely disappointed it's not going ahead, because as I say, this is just going on and on and on and on. I was willing for it to go ahead. However, it's not. I have a couple of concerns. One is what the monitoring officer just stated, that if unless I've misinterpreted her comments, that if I have a representative, I can't basically speak. It's got to go through him, did you say?
No, that's not the case.
It's not the case.
No, that you can speak when you choose to, and you can ask your representative to speak on your behalf when you choose as well.
Right. Okay.
So just to clarify, I did say that is an issue, that if the hearing was going ahead today, the panel will clarify with you what role you wanted your representative have, whether your representative speaks on your behalf. So that is the next steps in this, that the panel will clarify with you the role of your representative.
Right. Okay. So I misinterpreted that. Okay. My other point is, well, 2 points really. I did ask the monitoring officer if the public would be in attendance, and she replied, in terms of whether the hearing will take place in private or in public domain, the hearing panel will make a determination on this on Tuesday next week. Well, I never heard whether it would be or it wouldn't be.
Sorry, excuse me, Councillor Hardcastle, could you repeat that please a bit more slowly, because I couldn't understand what you said.
Sorry. In terms of whether this is the monitoring officer replying to my asking, in terms of whether the hearing will take place in private or in public domain, domain, the hearing panel will make a determination of this on Tuesday next week. It may be certain parts of the hearing may be in private, with others in public. However, this is a determination the panel will make. I will send you the papers out to you by email, and we know that I didn't get that. But my concern is, you mentioned something we've got to register. So I've got 3 fellow councillors as members of the public. If this had gone ahead today, would they have been allowed to speak today or not?
No.
So how if you don't know this, how can that be fair?
Monitoring officer, would you like to speak?
So as I've previously indicated, there is a public participation scheme which the council hosts with every meeting, and we can send you details about that, and details are available on the website. This means that each person at the start of the meeting has up to 3 minutes to give their views based on the remit of the committee or an item on the agenda for the hearing. It does not afford you the opportunity to question them. It does not afford you the opportunity to interrupt them or ask them questions as part of that. It is merely for the panel and members of the panel to listen to each of them. The panel may take into account the information that's being provided, or may choose to disregard the information that's provided and just focus on the evidence that's printed within the agenda. But it's not the normal way of calling witnesses. So just draw your attention to the pre-hearing checklist, and perhaps we have again a conversation outside of this meeting around the procedure once you've had the opportunity to consider it, because there is a question in there that says, do you believe that witnesses should be called to the hearing? If yes, please identify the witnesses you wish to be called and briefly identify the issues that we'll be able to give evidence about.
Yeah.
And so that is the area where, if you've got witnesses to be called, that you complete that form and the panel considers the contents of your feedback in the pre-hearing checklist as part of the procedure.
I did
so
do
that's
that.
different to the public participation scheme that the council hosts.
I do understand that. I understand the difference between a witness and a member of the public. I'm just asking, how would you know? How would people know that they have to register?
Excuse me, can we just the panel, the participants in the meeting to speak? The other aspect that Councillor Hardcastle asked about was exclusion of press and public, I believe,
yes.
To understand when that can be used and why it's there.
So
Please.
the Chair, both Mrs Hale and Councillor Hardcastle indicated that it would be content for this hearing to go in public. They're both asked as part of the pre-hearing checklist whether they would wish this to be undertaken in private, which means to the exclusion of the press and the public. By law, ordinarily, it is the practice that all meetings take place in public. And there are some instances whereby the meeting needs to be in private or with the exclusion of the press and public. In this instance, with it being a public meeting, the elements where this meeting will go into a private session or the exclusion of the press and public is at any point in time that you as a panel wish to deliberate or draw your conclusions or take advice on information that you've heard during the hearing. On those occasions, the press and the public will be invited to leave the room to allow you that confidential space to make your deliberations.
Okay, right, thank you, everybody.
Sorry, Chair. I haven't
Sorry,
finished.
excuse me, Councillor Hardcastle. I'd just like to say something. I think at this point, it's clear that there needs to be some further questions answered before the hearing can go ahead, and we need to set a date. I wonder if there's any indication of the kind of time frame that we might be thinking about at all. Are we able to offer any indication of that at this point or not? Thank you.
That will be subject to room availability and parties availability.
Okay, so at this point we're unable to give an indication, but we will get back to you as soon as possible so that you have as much notice as is possible for that date. And I think that given the conversations that we've been having, this is around procedure and understanding of what will happen. And I think that this should be taken, as the monitoring officer has explained, she's willing to discuss any of these issues with you individually so that you understand what to expect. And unless there is something that is particularly pressing, I think we are ready to draw this meeting to a close. Councillor Hardcastle, can this not be taken up with the monitoring officer in at another point?
I'm sorry, I feel strongly about that. No.
Well, I will tell you that I'll make a decision on that as you speak, and I may ask you to stop so that we can bring this meeting to a close if I feel that
Okay.
the monitoring officer can deal with your request.
Yep, so right. It's a question. Because this is being adjourned, I have major concerns about the procedure. My own view is, and I've got a 7-page document that I was going to read out today, but to save time and the fact if we get to the next meeting and I disclose this at the next meeting and then we have another adjournment, or we might not, I don't know. Is it possible that I can lodge this with the panel to save time at the next meeting?
I think that we need to consider that with the monitoring officer, and it's not a decision to be made today. And I'm not sure that procedural points are for this particular panel. That's for different considerations. So I think you need to put your representations to the monitoring officer and the Joint Standards Committee, and we will take that from that point. Councillor Hardcastle.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you. Right, everybody, I think we are now ready to bring this meeting to a close, and everybody will be communicated with in appropriate manner with the full information they need as soon as possible. So thank you for attending, and apologies for the delay.